This is the new Micro Studio G2 camera by Blackmagic Design that we've all expected for quite a bit of time now. It's finally shipping, so I've had some time to play with a unit that we purchased, and spoiler alert, it's really good. Today we are going to review the features of the camera and show you how we plan to use it as a powerful PTZ camera with a DJI gimbal, automatic subject tracking, smartphone monitoring and more. Let's get going. With its minimal dimensions of 8x7x7 centimeters and 300 grams, this camera is really tiny. I really think Blackmagic could not have made it any smaller because it's like so small already. We can hook it up easily in hard to access locations with a magic arm, and there are several 1/4-inch threads, one on the top and 3 at the bottom. At the back of the camera we can find a built-in LPE6 battery socket. In my testing with a battery like this, the camera can be powered on for 60 to 70 minutes, so you can't really rely on these for a show, but the camera charges when DC power is plugged in the camera. So it means the camera can act as a UPS by preventing your camera from losing power if you are hot switching power supplies or if you have a temporary outage. There is no LCD screen on the camera itself. It could have been nice if Blackmagic made a tiny preview screen, but it would have also made the camera bigger and more expensive, so I think it was a smart decision. Instead of the screen, Blackmagic gave us an HDMI port, which is super convenient. And that brings me to my next part, connections and I/O. In terms of I/O, I think we have literally everything we need. A major upside with this camera when comparing it to compact cameras such as GoPros or even the Blackmagic Pockets is that we now have super low latency 12G SDI in and out ports, so you can output a 4K signal to your switcher. It can also be set to HD, of course, if you don't need 4K. You can also control the camera remotely through the network with a USB to LAN adapter using an open REST API that Blackmagic has recently introduced. However, if you plan to use this camera with an ATEM switcher, you don't need to go this route since you can fully control the camera remotely using either SDI or HDMI. The camera is powered with a locking DC 12V 2.5mm jack input, and it comes with a power supply. We also have a low latency 1080p HDMI output port for local monitoring, on which you can toggle tools like focus peaking, zebra, status view, grid and more. It's worth noting that none of these overlays can be activated on the SDI out ports, these are only for the HDMI. We also have a 3.5mm jack microphone input and a built-in stereo microphone for scratch recording. I found that the built-in microphone quality is lower than the one on the other Blackmagic cameras like the Pocket cameras. I'm testing the built-in microphones of the Pocket 4K. Now I'm testing the built-in microphones of the Micro Studio. To finish with, Blackmagic also added a locking USB-C port, which can be used for firmware updates, recording on a hard drive, control over IP with a LAN dongle, or even focus and zoom control with the zoom and focus demands. But I really see myself using the USB more for hard drive recording since there is no built-in SD card slots. Besides, the camera can actually record with the Blackmagic Raw codec in 4K, which is absolutely stunning because Blackmagic didn't disappoint us on the sensor choice. The Micro Studio comes with the same sensor and same image processing than the beautiful Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. I was quite skeptical that they could come up with the exact same image quality of the Pocket 4K given the super small form factor of the camera. I ran a few tests on 3 different scenes, making sure I switched to the exact same lens and kept the exact same settings on each camera. And yes, the image quality, the color, the noise level is really the same. And it does not overheat. Well, it does get a bit warm, but it's not a problem at all in my opinion. So for sure, trust me, you will definitely get a much better quality than the vast majority of cameras of this size, such as GoPros or industrial cameras. The camera comes with an MFT lens mount, so you can use any Micro Four Thirds or EF lens with a speed booster. Now, I don't really like the image quality coming from the MFT power zoom lens, those 4 lenses that have built-in zoom servo. These are unfortunately a bit soft and not very good in low light, so our lens of choice is the Olympus 12100 f4, which we use with the DJI focus motor. I will come back to that later in the video. Now, at this stage, you might be wondering, how do we access the camera menus and settings if there is no built-in screen? Let's split that in two. For camera menus, you can connect an HDMI screen and scroll through the menus using the 4 buttons in front of the camera. They will show up in front of the video feed, and the UI is a bit like the Blackmagic HyperDex or web presenters. They will allow you to do things like set the ATEM camera ID, recording mode, etc. For camera settings such as ISO, white balance, iris, shutter, focus, everything, these can also be controlled using the buttons on the camera, but I really don't find it convenient at all, so I would definitely recommend controlling everything through ATEM software or something else, but not with the buttons. In theory, the menu navigation looks fairly straightforward and the UI is pretty well thought, I think, but I think it also turns out to be the biggest flaw of the camera. If you need to change things like the ATEM camera number, you have to connect an HDMI monitor and mess around with the 4 buttons. I really wish they had implemented a Bluetooth chip like most other Blackmagic cameras, so that every setting could be made with a smartphone. I think that in 2024 it would have been a smarter choice, but anyways. The workaround I found is to access the menus on my phone, since I am using a gimbal that can allow this. I'll come back to that later in the video. Another peculiar thing I noticed is that the SDI out video feed can only be set to clean feed, so you won't be able to turn the status on and off remotely with our middle control app like the other Blackmagic cameras. Apart from that, the great thing with this camera is that the most important settings like ISO, iris, focus, color, white balance can be fully controlled from the control room. But what about pan, tilt, roll and zoom? What about adding some motion? If you wish to remotely control the motion of your camera, there are quite a few options on the market with standard pan and tilt stepper motors, but these will not compensate for vibrations at long focal length. And since the Blackmagic cameras don't have built-in sensor stabilization, we went for another option for our cameras: brushless gimbals. DJI 3-axis brushless gimbals are known for their impressive active gyroscopic stabilization, which when used for live broadcast turns out super practical when your camera is on top of a pole or in an area where there are loads of people walking around the camera. However, since the gimbals are initially designed for handheld use, the control options DJI provides, such as their Bluetooth app or the 5 meters long control cable, are not suited for many live productions. To address this, we built the middle control software that can control up to 8 DJI gimbals and Blackmagic cameras remotely over IP with the middle remotes. This compact all-in-one remote that can control pan, tilt, zoom, focus, iris, ISO, CCU in one single professional device. You can also map the buttons and access of any USB gaming joystick and even Bitfocus Companion. For each gimbal that you have, you can use our APCR module that connects to your DJI gimbal and camera on one end and converts that to Ethernet on the other for IP-based control. With this solution, you have access to pan, tilt, roll straight from the control room and even the zoom of any lens you like with this DJI focus motor. The APCR connects to the gimbal using CAN bus cable and to the camera using Bluetooth. It is worth noting that the Micro Studio is not equipped with a Bluetooth chip, so the APCR cannot talk to the camera using Bluetooth. But if you have an ATEM, this is not an issue, since the middle control software also connects to your ATEM, which can itself control the camera. So this way you still have proper camera control. In addition to complete gimbal and camera control, you can also save position presets for both the gimbal and the camera. So you can record the complete state of the gimbal and camera parameters, such as pan, tilt, roll, focus, zoom, ISO, iris, everything, and record them later. This can be done using our app or through Bitfocus Companion, which is a bit more practical since on Companion you can rename and organize presets however you like. Talking of Companion, our free Middle Control Companion plugin also allows you complete access to all camera and gimbal settings. You can bring up all the current Micro Studio values set in the item, the current gimbal XYZ position and zoom, adjust these settings, save presets, and even toggle other tools such as focus motor calibration or false colors, focus peaking remotely. All of the gimbal and camera settings I just talked about can be accessed as companion variables, so that opens up a whole world of possibilities. It's worth noting that if you only want to access the Micro Studio Camera settings, you don't need the APCR. The APCR is just for gimbal work. You just need to install the Companion plugin and have Middle Control software running on your Mac or PC, and then you will be able to control any Blackmagic camera that is connected to the item, not just this camera. What I like most about this camera, apart from its sensor and form factor, is the HDMI port that comes in addition to the SDI port. If you use a DJI gimbal, you can connect this HDMI output to the DJI Revenai module and then monitor your Micro Studio video feed, settings and menu straight from your phone. Isn't that amazing? Actually, you can even bring up the camera view on the Ronin display too. Also, the Middle Control software allows you to toggle the active track feature of the Revenai on and off remotely. Just center your frame on the subject you want the gimbal to track and press the active track button in the app, in Companion or on your joystick or the middle remote. Thanks to advanced DJI image processing, the gimbal will then follow the subject automatically until you decide to stop. Isn't that a perfect excuse for a coffee break? Now, just a heads up, having used this feature quite a few times, although it looks amazing on paper, I would like to point out that it will work better for wide or semi-wide shots where you can see the speaker completely. It won't work well for multiple speakers or when you do tight shots, for which I would recommend hiring camera operators. Operating a Micro Studio camera often involves managing multiple cables. For those whose primary focus isn't studio shoots but rather mobile live productions, the prospect of regularly unwinding 2 expensive 12G SDI cable drums and 1 Ethernet cable drum for a PTZ head might not be very appalling. And this is why we developed the Fiber Camera Box 12G PTZ. This device merges the 12G SDI in, 12G SDI out of the camera and an LAN Ethernet connection of the APCR into a single duo LC fiber with a Nutric connector. This allows for the use of standard LC cable or durable Nutric optical cone cable drums. It's quite similar to the Fiber Camera Box 12G that we launched earlier this year, but the PTZ version includes this built-in additional LAN port. Converting your SDI signal to fiber also brings several advantages. It enhances reliability as the fiber is insensitive to electromagnetic noise, it enables cable runs of over 100 meters, and these cables are more affordable and lighter than 12G SDI cables. So, when a new camera is released, we often end up slightly upset on the small details that have been left out by the manufacturer. However, this particular camera generally impresses me, making me think this is exactly what I would have wanted in a super compact camera for live production. It's obvious that Blackmagic really paid attention to the details in this camera. Actually, I struggle to identify any significant drawbacks or areas for improvement, and that's saying something, considering I wasn't paid by Blackmagic to make this video. As I said, I purchased the camera myself. With a price tag of $995, this camera truly delivers exceptional value for the money. We definitely plan to acquire several more of these units later. There are still a few things that I would like to point out just in case Blackmagic is listening. First, the lack of Bluetooth chip. So while we have other options to control the camera remotely, such as SDI, HDMI, Ethernet, there is one setting that we cannot control remotely, and that is the ATEM camera number. And trust me, in our case, at least we change camera IDs quite often, so that is really super inconvenient to plug an HDMI monitor each time we need to change the camera number. I wish we could at least set it using the USB-C with the camera setup app, just like Blackmagic converters. Second, since the sensor is 4K, an amazing feature would be to allow users to remotely control and move a variable crop window within the sensor, a sort of a digital zoom that could be controlled with the ATEM. This would be amazing. And to finish with, I hope we could see another version of that camera with a Super 35 sensor and an interchangeable lens mount that has both EF and B4, just like the Ursa Broadcast G2, so that we could use broadcast lenses which are parfocal and have built-in zoom motors. But this is still an outstanding camera, and I think Blackmagic really nailed it on this one. So all in all, should you buy this camera? Well, I must admit that I am super impressed with what Blackmagic has managed to pack in such a tiny form factor while maintaining the core features that we all love without compromise. I don't own any Lumix PGH1 or Z-Cam competitor camera to make a comparison on what is already out on the market, but one thing is certain: if you already have an ATEM switcher and you appreciate the whole Blackmagic control workflow in itself and the color science and everything, well, trust me, you will love this camera. Thanks for watching and see you soon.